typical dad, he'd have his windows rolled down in that 1960s truck and his air conditioner on full blast. I'm going to talk to you today. I'm going to give you a story, okay? And this story is very close to me because it's my dad. And this story is mentioned in my book. And again, you can get my book on Amazon or get a free copy of Money Help when you reach out to us. But Dad was a rice farmer in southwest Louisiana in a parish. Many of you out there have counties in Louisiana's parish, in Evangeline Parish. And the land wasn't really rich land. Daddy always was, in a healthy way, jealous of the Midwest farmers that could produce so much more crops per acre. And he was basically a rice and soybean farmer. And in 1970, I was 10 years old. I can still remember riding around with Dad on the farm. And, you know, typical dad, he'd have his windows rolled down in that 1960s truck and his air conditioner on full blast. And he's riding slow through those dirt roads in his fields, checking his rice crop. This happened to be in the spring, and the rice was just coming up. And my dad turns to him, and he stops, and he says, "Son," I said, "Yeah." He says, "You see that rice there?" He said, "That purdy is growing." He said, "It's just coming up. It's beautiful." I said, "Yeah, that's pretty, Dad." He said, "I'm going to let the water off of it." He said, "I'm going to let the ground crack and get hard as could be, and the rice is going to almost die." And even as a 10-year-old, it didn't seem too logical to me. I said, "Well, why would you do that, Dad?" He said, "Because what's going to happen is it's going to force those roots to dig deep for moisture in the ground." So that story of Stress the Rice as a 10-year-old in 1970, you know, it stuck with me. And in later years, it came to mean a whole lot more. And as I compared it to life, I realized that if we don't go through tough times, you know, it's always you have to fail. And when you fail, you learn. You never lose. That's what Amy tries to remind me all the time. So you learn a lot. But we learn from each other as well. And I'm going to share this story, and I hope you learn something from it. My dad's cash flow planning and how he did it. So he was a rice farmer, as I said, and he did, as a good dad, he had to leave farming for a time. My mom wasn't well, so he took another job, but his heart was always in farming, and so he came back to it, maybe in his 50s. And Dad ended up doing what he could to earn a living, because basically in southwest Louisiana in a rice farm, it's not a get-rich kind of farming. You know, you farm to pay the bills and hopefully have enough left over to live. And Daddy always built his life around his occupation. He tried to. We had great times. Nobody spent more time with his dad than I did, and my two brothers. So we had great times hunting, fishing together. Here's the story. When Dad was ready to retire, he had built up basically 3 assets. One consisted of real estate. He owned about 500 acres of land. He had inherited about 250, and then he purchased 250 that he paid for over his lifetime. He had a home, a reasonable home, probably worth about a couple of $100,000. And he also had cash value life insurance, about $450,000. So when Dad decided to retire, his cash flow plan was put into effect. Now, he didn't do, and this is the whole point of this story, not everybody is going to plan the same and has to or should. Not everybody should be buying stocks and bonds and going into a government 401ks only, okay? Because that's what's happening today. They aren't creating tailor-made plans for individuals. And in this case, Dad built a system where by owning real estate and farming, when he went to retire, what he did is he rented his farm out, and he got possibly about I'd say a 4% return from it. So basically that provided him with about $50,000 gross of income. He could deduct a lot of expenses because the farm allows that. And then he had income from Social Security, but it wasn't taxed because he didn't have too much income. So you see, that was in the thoughts too. In addition to that, when he needed additional capital, he then turned to the equity in his house, and he used something called a reverse mortgage. Now that wasn't taxable. So, you see, Dad had a lot of forethought into what he planned, and he did his own individual plan. It allowed him to have his cake and eat it too, you know, manner of speaking. The land that he loved and he lived on was also part of his retirement. So it wasn't some cold ownership of stocks far away that he couldn't play in. And it's just an example of one way that you can plan your life, okay? That said, I want to tell you that there's a lot of good information out there. This book in particular is on reverse mortgages. And it's written by Wade Pfau, a PhD, certified financial analyst. He's a professor at the American College. And he talks about incorporating different assets into a creative plan to plan the cash flow. So I encourage you to read it. The first part of the book is really not even about reverse mortgages. It's a lot about the chemistry of money. So as always, God, motivation, and money. Build your life first around family, God and family, and use the tools at your discretion. Work with a team that understands how to put all the pieces together like a good gumbo. It takes the right ingredients in the right proportions, and nobody likes gumbo quite the same way. Some like it a little bit more pepper than others. So work with a team that understands that. Don't be in a robotic type plan where everybody's getting on the bus and they're herding the cattle all the way to the slaughterhouse. Build a creative plan that deals with the 3 R's. Rate of return, of course, but rate of taxes is important, and how much you can take out of these plans makes a big difference in whether they're taxable or not. So keep the focus on that. And this is just one story. I'll share some other stories of creative ways that people have planned and how they did it. With always, I'll tell you to bring God into your life. Pray and bring him into your plans, because if God be for us, who can stand against us? I love that. I'll leave you with my good friend Phil. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Phil 4:13. God bless. 3 R's.